Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to Off Boot Behavior. Today we are looking at derby boots pattern engineering. Of course, first things first, you need to do fit measurement. So I'm measuring what's called the ball girth, which is basically measuring the circumference around the end of your big toe and the end of your small toe. Then I'll measure the instep girth and then also the short heel. The short heel is very important because we're making a boot in this instance. And then, because it's an ankle length boot, we would also measure the circumference around the calf. So these are the measurements that I got. The ball girth was 26.5 cm, instep girth 27 cm. The short heel was 38.5 cm, and then my calf was 25 cm in circumference. So the next thing is to match the last that you're going to use to all of these measurements and see that everything is okay. So you see the ball girth around here is about 27 cm, so I have an extra 0.5 cm to toy with. That's okay. And then my instep is 27, exactly what I heard in the measurement on my foot. And it's a derby boot, so there'll be provision for lace. So the fact that it's exactly the measurement is not much of a problem. Now let's get down to last sketching. So you sketch on your last just to visualize the design you want to create on that particular last, and ensure yourself that it looks good on the last. First step in this process is to measure the standard last length by measuring from the middle of the center line at the back to the tip of the last. On this last, it came to 34 cm. Now let's do the center line. I talked about the center line without defining what it is. So the center line, you just draw a few points along the center of the last by eyeballing it. And then if you draw a straight line on masking tape and use that straight line to connect the dots, you probably have a straight line dividing the last into two, symmetrically equal parts. You do the same thing at the back, mark out a few points along the center and then use your straight line that you draw on masking tape to connect the dots. So congratulations, you now have your center lines. Now let's look at the balls. The balls are the widest points on the last or your feet. In any case, so you find them by placing the last tangential to a flat surface and marking the point where it lies tangential to that flat surface. Now if you use your masking tape to connect those 2 points, those 2 widest ball points, and then draw a line, that line you draw is called the vamp line. So it runs from the left side ball to the right side ball, and the point where it crosses the center line is called the vamp point. Now at the back, we're going to find points called the counterpoint. So the counterpoint is 20% of the standard last length, or the standard last length divided by 5. On this last, with standard last length of 34, it came to 6.8 cm. If we add 1 cm to that point, we find another point called the back height. So the back height is counterpoint plus 1 cm. So we have found our counterpoint and back height. Let's find another point called the instep. The instep lies on the center line in front, and it is 1/4 of the standard last length, measuring from the vamp point. 1/4 of 34 came to, I think, 8.5. So we mark that on the center line, and then the same 8.5, if we measure from the center line at the back underneath, we'll mark another point at the edge of the feather edge. Next thing, we are going to divide the vamp line on the right side into 2. Into 9 cm, dividing it into 2 will give us 4.5 cm. Draw a line from the counterpoint to that subdivision point on the lateral side vamp line to get another line called the waterline. Now remember this point that we marked. If we draw a right angle from that point going towards the quarter line, the point where it touches the quarter line, if we connect from the instep to that point, we will begin to have a line which will be a guide for the opening of this derby. So we are designing a derby which we are going to convert into a derby boot. So you would have a derby shoe first and then convert it to a derby boot. So let's find the measurement of our cap toe, because this is going to be a cap toe derby. So I typically just use 1/4 of the standard last length, and then plus or minus 1 or 0.5 cm. So in this case, 1/4 gave me 8.5 cm, and then I added about just 0.5 cm to make it up to 9, and that is the measurement with which I generated the cap toe of this derby. So now let's just revise some of the things that we have done. The standard last length, like we mentioned when we started, is 34 cm. And then we found our vamp line by connecting ball to ball. So we had that vamp line, and then we had the vamp point. Then we did our cap toe by dividing the standard last length by 4. Cap toe was 1/4 of the standard last length, and then we drew it by drawing a line at the point we measured at right angle from the center line, and then just drawing it all the way down. Then the facing of this derby, I typically like to start my facings about 1.5 cm away from the vamp point. So if I use the width of my flexible tape, that will give me that point. Then I draw 90 degrees from that point, 90 degrees to the center line, of course, drawing it down towards the quarter line. So now this is my counterpoint and this is my back height. I'll draw another point from my back height to that same terminal point of my quarter line, which is of course the middle point of our vamp line on the lateral side. So you remember when we drew our instep, we said the instep was 1/4 of the standard last length, measuring from the vamp line, and that 1/4 was 8.5 cm, 1/4 of 34, and then we measured it from the vamp line on the center line in front. It wasn't clear when we did it earlier ago, so I'm just revising it. So measure 8.5 from the vamp point, and we marked out our instep at the center line in front. Now the reason why I brought that back is because, and then also of course that same 8.5 we generated the short heel line at the back and drew a right angle towards the quarter line. So let's leave that aside for now. Now we drew a line from the instep towards the short heel line. Now that line, we're going to use it to find our width, the width of the tongue of this derby. Now the measurement I use for the width of the tongue is usually the standard last length divided by 8, and that gave me 4.25. Of course, if 1/4 of the standard last length is 8.5, that tells you that 1/4 of 1/8 of the standard last length will be 4.25. So that's the width of this tongue. So that's the point also from which I will begin to draw down the tongue just towards a point shy of the middle point of the lateral side vamp line. So if I draw a line if I draw a point about 0.5 cm beneath that middle point and draw a line down towards it, that gives me immediately the tongue of this derby. Now, the facing of this derby, I will draw a line at right angle from the point that I marked out earlier. Just draw a line at right angle from there, and then the point where it touches the waterline will be the point from where I will measure, the curve that comes down towards the derby. So I just divided the standard last length by 5, came to about 6 point something, and then I would use that point again to just determine the point from where I'll start curving. So this is about 6.5, and I'll just curve. Of course, you can freehand sketch this, but I just wanted to give you a guide that you can use if you just make every part of your pattern a proportion of your standard last length. Now let's finish off the opening of this derby by curving from the tongue line into the line coming from the back height, and then also curve in the tongue to this curve at the right here so that it doesn't sharply turn into the vamp. So you see, this derby is complete now. The next step will be to peel out the design and generate something called a mean form. And mean forms is exactly the subject of our next class. Your own assignment for this class, however, is to design your own derby, submit it in the class, and if you have any questions, also post it in the comment section or in the Telegram class. See you in class, and God bless you.